Hi, welcome to City at a Glance. My name is David Young, and with us, as always, is our city manager, Darren Atterbury. Darren, thanks so much for joining us
Thanks,
today.
David. Appreciate it.
City at a Glance is a show where we discuss topics that are of interest to Fort Collins, and today we have a special guest, Fire Chief Tom DeMint, and today we'll be discussing the Poudre Fire Authority, or PFA. Tom, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me over.
We appreciate it. So just to begin with, Darren and Tom, could you kind of just begin by discussing how the City of Fort Collins and PFA work together in a partnership?
Yeah, well, let me kick it off, and Tom can maybe even talk about some of the historical perspective. But the partnership between the Fire Authority and the City of Fort Collins is phenomenal. In fact, it's a model for other cities around the state and also around the country. I think that there is and Tom will probably talk a little bit about the governance structure and things like that, but the relationship is excellent. We get world-class levels of service and fire services from Poudre Fire Authority here at the City of Fort Collins. I think we're getting an incredible return on the investment that the city has placed in this authority. And Tom, I'm just looking forward to helping share the story and just talk about world-class services.
And I think we have a great story to tell. It is a model that's been captured in other communities. We began the quest as the Poudre Fire Authority in 1981. We go clear back to 135 years ago when fire service started here as a volunteer service and gradually became a paid service in 1915. Through the way that the districts kind of formed out, we had a city and then we had a fire district that surrounded the city, made a donut around the city called the Poudre Valley Fire Protection District. And that's the other partner of the Poudre Fire Authority. The city and the Poudre Valley Fire Protection District came together in 1981 under the leadership of Chief John Mulligan, who was the city's fire chief, and Chief Chuck Willis, who was the district's fire chief, and created a phenomenal response model at the time. And since then, we've learned how it makes a great governance model as well. It really works for an efficient and effective service.
Tell us a bit about some of the services that PFA provides to citizens of Fort Collins.
With services, of course, we are your fire department.
Yeah.
We are the Fort Collins Fire Department. We actually 235 square miles that we provide fire protection services, but we're the only ones that have fire written on the door. Means we're going to respond to the fire, although it's not a great amount. It's 5% of our calls are fire calls. So we respond to fires, wildfires, structure fires, but we also respond to medical emergencies, automobile accidents, service calls. We even respond to cats in trees. Believe it or not, we've even gotten birds out of trees for people who have exotic birds that have escaped. So we're pretty much an all hazards emergency response agency, and then we also provide fire prevention services as well, not only on the enforcement side, where plan reviews and development reviews, but also public education services. We just brought on a new public education coordinator who will be working more with the kids, and the two at-risk populations in any community are the very young and the very old. We'll be working with those groups to do a better job. I think we're doing a great job now, but do even better of getting information to them how they can be safe.
Tom, I have a question. I think you said 235 square miles. What are just generally the boundaries? Now, clearly there's the City of Fort Collins, but it goes significantly west and north and a little bit east.
To the west, we go into Laurie State Park, the western boundaries of Laurie State Park, also Redstone Canyon on the western boundaries, the LaPorte area, Bellevue area, all the way up to Whale Rock Road, and Risk Canyon, north about halfway between Fort Collins and Wellington. We go east, actually along Highway 14, we even go a couple miles into Weld County, and south about halfway between Fort Collins and Loveland. So it's a big response area. Granted, the density of calls is in the city where, where the density of population is. This year we'll run about 18,000 emergency calls. We'll have about 18,000 calls for service, which will equate to about 25,000 responses, because sometimes we send more than one piece of apparatus on a call.
Wow. And how many firefighters do you have?
We have, right now we have 164 uniformed firefighters.
Okay. Wow.
And then we have about another 25 volunteers that provide service, like we talked about Redstone Canyon, the Horsetooth area. Currently in the Timoth area, we have volunteer response. And then total, we're about 220 if you include our civilian staff and volunteer staff as well.
Definitely. I want to discuss a little bit the governance of PFA. Probably most citizens aren't familiar with how the operations work. Could both of you kind of speak a little bit to that and the intergovernmental agreement that helps PFA operate?
Yeah, recently, I think it was just this last summer, we passed, City Council passed the resolution to adopt a new intergovernmental agreement with the Poudre Valley Fire Protection District. Because we have the Poudre Fire Authority Board of Directors, which is a 5-member board of directors. It's made up of 2 members of City Council, 2 members of the Poudre Valley Fire Protection District, and 1 member elected at large, which has always been the city manager since our inception. We found it to be a very good governing system. As governance, it's worked great. We've never had a split vote between the two different entities that formed it. We've had ideological split votes, but we've never had a split vote between city and the district. So we feel that shows that the governance is working pretty well. Yeah. The district board is comprised of people who live outside the city, and they are elected, and then the council appoints the members to come over from there. The intergovernmental agreement established a funding formula for the city. The district's money, they're funded by a mill levy that is, that just basically goes to the district, and the district, by the intergovernmental agreement, passes that to the authority. And then the city authorizes the revenue allocation formula from the city, and that's how we're funded.
Definitely. As a member of the board, Darren, can you kind of speak to the city side and how you can probably provide a little bit of a different perspective?
Yeah, well, I think Tom's outlined it well. Excuse me. I think it works phenomenally well, and I think the reason why is because we have mutual objectives. I mean, the commonalities between the district and the authority are fantastic. I think that the partnership has had a very strong history, and as Tom has alluded to, we've made some changes in the intergovernmental agreement to modernize it, and I think it's set it forward for the future very, very well. And some of those conversations were about, autonomy of the board and oversight of the council, and I think we got that just right. I think the blend, I think the Poudre Fire Authority and the district have a very appropriate amount of autonomy from the city, but we also they're a major contractor of ours, so the city allocates a significant amount of resources that goes, and with that we wanted some levels of accountability and reporting. And I think Tom, with one of his people, Ann Turnquist, and our CFO, Mike Beckstead, and some others, drafted that, brought it to all the boards and the council, and really came up with a great model that, again, it wasn't outdated, but it definitely needed, maybe it was, it needed some updating and for the future, and I think we're set that way. The other thing that I want to say is Tom has, as a chief, he reports to the authority and the district board, he actually sort of, and I'll say voluntarily, participates in our city executive leadership team meeting. So Tom's not required to do that. In other cities where the fire department is a city department, then the chief would report to the city manager. That's a different reporting relationship that we have. And so Tom's participation on the city executive team really ensures that we're collaborating and coordinating. I mean, an interesting question, and maybe I'll pose it to you, Tom, is people may be wondering the relationship between police and fire. We talk about public safety. I'll start it off. I'll start it off by saying I think the relationship between Fort Collins Police Services and Poudre Fire Authority has never been stronger in the last 20 years that I've been here. And I attribute that to Tom's leadership and Chief Hutto's leadership. And but those two organizations just have an interest in working together. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I think it's relevant.
it's a great point, and it's one thing that I think we need to be really proud of in our community, that the relationship at the street level between the firefighters and the police officers is working very well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there could be an issue, but they'll work it out between them. They'll talk with each other. I mean, it could be where someone parked, or they're not major issues. Our executive staffs, both from Police Services and Poudre Fire Authority, work together, working on things like active shooters, working on fire responses, working on other disaster response. They have regular meetings and are having those conversations all the time. And one of the, being on the executive lead team gives me a good exposure. I get to see Chief Hutto a lot. Chief Hutto and I have a very close relationship, and I think it makes it work throughout the whole system, and we're very proud of that. We also have a good relationship with the Sheriff's Office, because in those district areas we work with them as well. So we maintain a relationship with Sheriff Smith and his staff as well. You
know, the other thing I think about is, Tom, you being on the city's executive team, the relationship between Fort Collins and Poudre Fire Authority is not just, I highlighted police and you highlighted the sheriff, but the relationship between the utilities and the fire authority, or the planning department in terms of inspections, or the parks department. I mean, the relationships are, the need for collaboration is very high. Mm-hmm. And again, I think in this governance structure where they're separate, you could see where there would be challenges of this, of literal separation. Mm-hmm. Again, I think that's not been the case. I think, and Tom, it's a excuse me, opportunity for me to say, I think you've been a fantastic fire chief. You're relatively new as a chief. Just within, when did that?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. No, so you're not relatively new anymore. You're a veteran. But you came up through the fire authority, and I've been just so impressed with your leadership and the way in which where you're taking the Poudre Fire Authority, and just as a member of the executive leadership team, again, that you're doing on a voluntary basis. You're not required to do that. I think the relationships you're building with the city organization, city departments, is very strong. The other thing I think I can honestly represent the city council in that this chief has also kept a great relationship with the board of directors of the city of Fort Collins, our mayor and city council, and that's also a very critical relationship.
I think that's important, and let me address that part first. I think it's important that I have a close relationship to council, because I naturally have a close relationship with the district, because by agreement we have right now, I'm their CEO. I'm the fire chief of the district, so I think it's important that I maintain that relationship with both parental entities, although they have representatives that come to the authority board. And I appreciate your comments, Darren, but I feel it's essential to be part of the executive leadership team because of those collaborative efforts. As you said, in the planning division or building services, where building inspectors and fire inspectors work closely together, so it's important that the leaders of those two entities be closely tied, so that we make sure that we're providing a straight stream of service that's unified, so it provides better service for our customers, just like it is with utilities. I mean, when we had the floods, our utilities department had been through the exercise of emergency management, and so we were able to go into the emergency management drill seamlessly, and that's a close working relationship with Utilities Director Kevin Gertig. He's been closely tied to the Poudre Fire Authority for years, far before his appointment to that position. So I think those collaborations are important.
Definitely. Speaking of the safety of citizens, I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on some of your prevention and your education methods for the public.
Well, on the prevention side, there's the 3 E's. There's education, engineering, and enforcement, that we like to talk about, and that's in our Fire Prevention Bureau. But as I said earlier, public education is very important to us. We, in fact, yesterday we started judging a poster contest that next year we'll have posters both on bus benches and also, well, just say we were having a meeting and somebody said, why don't we see if we can buy some place on some buses? I said, well, why do we need buses? We've got 12 great big trucks we drive around every day. So hopefully some kids will get to see their artwork on some of our fire apparatus as well. And it's all public safety messages. So we're very intentional about getting into the elementary schools. We have a program we do every year where a firefighter comes offline. Actually, he clowns around a bit. He's called Boots. He dresses up as a clown and goes and interacts with the children and takes them through. We have a trailer that's mocked up like a house, and we can teach them about cooking safety, crawling low and smoke. So we're very, very deliberate with that. And we also connect with the older generation because they're also at risk for fire. And a unique area that we, being a university town, we have a lot of relationships with the university, especially in the housing areas, where we help them with fire drills and give them some public education too. So prevention is huge. Ben Franklin said it best with his, a pound of prevention is worth, or excuse me, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But we even look at it as an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of suppression. If we can be very effective with our prevention efforts, it takes a lot of heat off the suppression side of it. Definitely. And it makes it where we can be more efficient and effective as a fire service.
And when that prevention doesn't work, obviously you guys have to respond. Could you talk a little bit about some of your response methods that you have in place? Yeah,
our response methods, it's a place where I can talk a little bit about our accreditation efforts, because
Definitely.
we're really in a really in-depth evaluation of our responses right now. We were talking before we went on air about our automatic alarm responses, and I just had a piece of data handed to me yesterday. Our automatic alarms, or false alarms, nuisance alarms from alarm systems, is half the national average. The national average is 10% of a department's calls are automatic alarms. Ours are at 5%. That's because we take each and every automatic alarm and we review it to find out if there's a problem in the building, problem with the system, and make those corrections.
Yeah.
And through our data analysis, we're changing how we respond to those, maybe not sending as much stuff because we know that it's such a low percentage where those are fires. And then we're looking over on when we do have an identified fire, of changing our response to that to create a safer environment for our firefighters. To make sure that we put firefighters in a building or around a building on a fire, then we have to have a crew. They may be trying to rescue a citizen, then we have to have a crew that rescues them. So we're changing how we respond that. So our response is constantly changing. We're evaluating it through what we call a standard of cover. So to say it's a particular certain sort of way, it's going to vary on each call. For a medical, we'll send one engine. We always send a fire engine on a medical emergency with an ambulance. That's a constant. That way you got extra hands, and like I said, there's 12 pieces of fire apparatus scattered about the city, so we can often get there before the ambulance.
Tom, what are some of the things that you lose sleep over, or that you're thinking about, over the next 15, 20, 30 years in your industry that people have to be paying attention to?
I think probably the most prevalent thing right now is a changing environment of inside our homes. When I started in this business, the chairs we sat on and stuff were cotton batted. They could be leather or wool on the outside, and that's going away. They're all becoming synthetic. What took a room, and you've heard us talk about flashovers since you've been on the board. There's the flashovers where everything in the room heats to a certain point, then it all ignites. With what we call legacy construction and legacy furniture, going back 20, 30, 40 years, it would take 20 minutes to reach that point. What we're finding now with research from National Institute of Standards and Testing and Underwriter Laboratories, that's happening in 2 to 4, 5 minutes. And that's about, if you think about 4 or 5 minutes, those are our response time benchmarks, and that's right about the time we're getting on scene. So that's, firefighter safety is always the thing that keeps me up at night. And we're changing. We've made big changes on how we approach fires from that research. Used to be we'd open the door and go barreling right in, and now if we can see the fire from the outside, we might hit it from the outside, which research has told us that's. So in the next 20 or 30 years, it's going to change even more. And then buildings are being built lighter weight. Codes have changed to where construction is much lighter weight, and when it's exposed to heat and fire, it crashes down, it falls apart, it collapses. So we have to be on the cutting edge of that, of making that environment as safe as we can. We've had great, with the city this last year, just to help me sleep better. We got down to where a duplex in the city of Fort Collins now, when it's built new, will have built-in fire sprinklers. And that's not only incredible, there's not recorded history of people dying in sprinkler buildings in residential occupancies. So that makes that safer for our citizens. That's our first thing, and it makes it safer for firefighters. So that and same thing probably, Darren, it keeps you up at night is growth and how we respond to that growth with our services. Keeping up with that growth and being able to keep our response times where they need to be and meet those needs.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Tom, myself and my team recently had the opportunity to do some CPR training, which was really exciting and good. And I understand that you guys are working on application coming out called Pulse Point, which will kind of tie into that. Could you kind of talk a little bit about that and what we can expect from that?
It's been a long time coming, and I think this time when we're looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, it's not a train. We've gone through some technical difficulties with making sure that Pulse Point, which I'll explain, is tied to our dispatch system. Pulse Point is a system that if you know CPR and if you don't know CPR, you can contact us, 221-6570. We can make sure that you get to a place where you can learn hands-only CPR. It takes literally 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We taught it at New West Fest. We taught it at the Peach Festival. We can teach CPR to anybody at any time because you don't have to breathe for anybody. You don't have to take a test. You just need to learn how to start doing compressions on someone's chest. If you know CPR, you soon, by the end of the year, we're very sure we'll have it by the end of the year, you'll be able to sign up for an application on your smartphone, and it will know where you're at. And if you're within a quarter mile and someone, we have a call type that suggests someone may be in cardiac arrest, it will summons you to render aid and also tell you where the nearest automatic defibrillator is. And that training is very easy as well. And
what I love about that, David, if you think about, you know, this notion of crowdsourcing and different things where there's applications where if a community wants to build a park, you know, you can have a online social conversation and contributions to build that park. That's actually where a lot of cities are moving towards in a lot of providing various services. So this, as I think about it, is almost like crowdsourcing people's public safety. Yeah. So the apparatus and the individuals take X number of minutes to get to that person who's having a cardiac situation. But think about if it takes how long on average, Tom, to get to say City Hall? How long would it take to get here?
For a response, we would probably be 4.5 to 5.
Okay, so David, if you and I are in City Hall and we have this Pulse Point and we get a notice from Pulse Point, go out and, by the way, grab the AED device on the way and walk out in the parking lot and begin to help that individual before Poudre Fire Authority or an ambulance or a police officer gets there. I mean, you know, the data is very clear about those first couple minutes are so important. But for me, it's really taking technology and leveraging it in this almost crowdsourcing way. So I think what I love about this is the emergency service providers in town say, we could use your help. We know you have we know you have tools available, the training, maybe even an AED device in your AED in your space. Take it and go out there and help us, and more importantly, help the patient. I just think that's I think it's phenomenal, and I am so glad that the City of Fort Collins, Tom, gets to be part of that, and your leadership and your team and the people in dispatch trying to make that happen is just fantastic. And I think I can say with great certainty a life or more will be saved as a result of this investment.
Absolutely. It's being used in about 400 different communities in the United States right now. The thing is, just from when we started, there were like 40, and it's just blossomed. And we've had, on the technical side, it's the first time our computer-aided dispatch vendor has had this tied into it, and they have to talk to each other. So the IT people are working that out. We're doing tests right now. We have tests. They're putting in a call as if it had happened, and we've got people commuting around the community, and it's hitting their iPhones or their smartphones.
Definitely.
So we're very anxious, and I know this will save a life.
Yeah, very exciting.
And it's also opening our minds to other ways that we can engage the community in the services we provide, because I think public safety is a community effort. It's not just us. It's not just the police or the ambulance. It's a community effort.
Very true. And that number again, if anybody would like to call for training?
221-6570.
221-6570, nice. Well, we are out of time, guys. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for your time, Tom.
Thank you.
And hope that you know a little bit more about your local fire authority now and how that works. Darren, as always, thank you so much for being here. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today on City at a Glance, and we look forward to seeing you next time.